to be a part of the government. And that's where you can kind of talk about democracy and the fact that we have this election upcoming, the ideas behind which began in this era, thousands of years ago in ancient Greece. And then if you want to talk about the depictions on here, this is actually a scene from the Trojan War. Which then you can also tie in the literature of the Iliad and Odyssey.
I just want to say a little bit more about this one.
Sure.
This, as you were mentioning, this it's really a beautiful plot when you'll look at this closely. It's a scene of Poseidon's horses being tended to right before they are sent off to the Trojan War, and similarly to the Hydria, where it's the Hydria is showing you how to use it. One of the important aspects of the symposium was the recitation of the Homeric epics. So while you're listening to a poet recite the Homeric epics, you're drinking from a wine cup that also is illustrated with a passage from the very poem you're listening to. So there's a self-referential aspect of the art that I think is really, really beautiful. And the other thing is that you can also talk about the naturalism that's intended in these drawings. The horse's anatomy, the horse's expression, their energy. They're not just standing there static. They're like any horse in a stable. They're showing their tension, their movement.
And that may be very interesting if you want to pull out those early posters with the images of the horses to see the evolution of, for example, the horse. If that's something that you've already talked about earlier, I think to see those three together may be very interesting.
They were quite static to start with.
Oh, what?
They were quite static to start with.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so this is now our next evolution of the pottery called red figure pottery.
You can compare them.
Absolutely.
So black on red, and all of a sudden it's red on black.
And this is actually an example of the volute. This is what Maury will be demonstrating in a few minutes. And so here, again, just I think right away you want to talk about the big change and what looks different. And at this point, I think it's worthy of noting to the kids, we don't need to just give the name, but that the red figure pottery was something that one guy just decided to try. Black figure pottery was in vogue, and he tried this new thing, and it took off, and it became the new fad in pottery. It was very clever because actually with this process, much more detail was added. And again, since there's horses and warrior scenes here, keep all four horses up. It may be a great, again, evolution to watch that. Yeah.
Could you describe a little bit the difference of technique?
Yes. Do you want to talk about?
In terms of the fundamental, are you talking about this change right here?
Yes.
Well, fundamentally, the same materials are used, and it was a three-part, I won't go into the whole detail, but there was a three-part firing technique that allowed the slip and the glazes to have the black versus the red of the pot. But in terms of this change from the black figure to the red figure, apparently it really was some guy. He was a painter in the pottery workshop of a potter who's identified as Antichides. One day he just flipped it, and there's actually a period of time where they have a number of pots. They're called bilingual pots, which on one side they're black figure, and on the other side they're red figure. And what they did is that they did these two-part pots to show clients, well, you're used to this, but if you turn, you're used to this, but you turn the vase around, and here's this new idea. And it was really just, it wasn't really a new technique in terms of the glaze, the pottery, throwing, the firing. It was just a brilliant idea, apparently, according to scholars, which is sort of an interesting thing to talk about. Innovation, the power of the individual mind to create a whole new way of looking at something that people had been doing for hundreds of years. And the reason that scholars say that it was such an interesting innovation in terms of allowing more artistic expression is because when you paint the outline of the figure, then what you're actually doing is allowing yourself a canvas on which to use very thin incisions and brushes to paint the detail. You can actually see the emotion in the faces of the human figures and even in the animals here. Anatomy, expression, the way the clothing worked, the way the chariots work. And one of the things that you'll see if you read this is that because so little painting, actual paintings of ancient Greek art, there's virtually nothing left. The only real depiction in drawing or painting that we have, a body of remnants to look at, is in the pottery. So that's kind of a long answer, but I hope that helps explain why this innovation is so interesting.
I think that, I think to answer your question, I think what she means is the technique. Like in the beginning, when they did black figure, they're painting slip-on, and then they're scratching it off to reveal underneath. But this is painting the slip directly on.
Right.
They're not scratching. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, that also, like, the clay is terracotta, is it red? Or that
Yes, it's a reddish clay.
And so what you see in the red figures, is it the clay that's
Yes.
terracotta?
Yeah.
Or is it the clay is in red?
It's actually the clay of the body of the pot, and then there's some luminescent quality that happens in the firing of the clay.
So it's almost like outlining your image and then painting the black around it to leave that blank space. It's completely doing the opposite. Instead of adding a line, you're painting around to make the image, you're leaving the clay in its natural state.
Like a stencil.
Like stencil.
I know we're going to get into the making of the stuff. Are you going to go over the words, slip and describe what slip is and that kind of thing?
I mean, I don't know if you want to get that technical. You could just call it a glaze, because I think it is to get into the actual.
Well, I don't know, because I don't want the kids to be confused with glaze when slip is actually watered down clay, but glaze usually has glass in it.
Right.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you think it's worthwhile to talk to the kids about what pottery is, like where they get the actual materials from, what they
It's
should do?
in here,
You can
actually.
get
Okay.
that in the beginning again,
Yeah,
when you
this,
speak about clay as a...
In this one, there's a whole list of things. You'll see it in your packet. It's preparing the clay. First, the clay was dug out of the ground, then back at the workshop. So you can go into how much detail you want. Oh, I just want to say that our attitude about this information is to give you a lot of information, let's say geared towards the 4th and 5th graders. And then for the younger grades, you can take the information out. It's much easier to take away information. It's much easier for us to ask you to take away information than for us to expect you to add information in. So that's why, for the younger kids, you'll just have to back away from the information. Okay, this got out of order.
That's all right. Okay, this is the last poster, and again, it's also red figure pottery. And I think this is kind of fun for the kids because hopefully you can start discussing what this person's doing, and he's playing an instrument called a lyre. Can get into how music was such a very, very important part to ancient Greeks. They were music lovers. Music was a part of everything they did, from sporting events to festivals, etc. Even on the battlefield, music was important. And then I think as you begin to look closely at how beautifully the actual art almost echoes the shape of the pot, you know, the discussion about the individual again in daily life being so important.